Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, March 26th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, we were just chatting before the podcast. The ratings have come out for the NCAA tournaments, both men and women, in some remarkable numbers.
Yeah, the men are setting records. This is the most people that have ever watched the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament. And the women, it's the second highest. Of course, last year there was Caitlin Clark and a lot of excitement around her. But it's good to see that there is still a lot of interest in the women's side as well.
And things are, coming down to the Sweet 16. The men's Sweet 16 starts tomorrow night. We, of course, have the Mo News brackets going on for Mo News Premium members. Jill, how are your brackets doing?
Moshe, I am ranked 108, which I don't think is horrible, given that I had Kansas going all the way, and they got knocked out in the first round.
You went through the, you allowed Microsoft AI to choose your bracket. It turns out that AI is just as bad as the rest of us, maybe worse than some of us. I was like, I'm not taking Kansas all the way. But I will say, Jill, you're doing much better than me. Just under 1,100 Mo News Premium members are in our March Madness, the men's bracket side. I'm ranked 632 right now.
All right, well, I'm in the top 10%. That is not bad.
And I'm down there right in the middle. Half of you are doing better than me, half of you doing worse than me. So that apparently is where I'm at. I've had years where I've done better, years where I've definitely done worse. We'll see how this all ends up, though. We got all my Final Four picks are still alive.
All right, let's get to some headlines here. The Trump administration doing damage control over the Signal group chat about the Yemen strike.
Yes, that chat of 18 top officials with war plans that we first mentioned yesterday. The conversation continues, and notably, Jill, President Trump standing by his team.
Democrats, though, calling for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz to resign. A very contentious hearing on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, we'll bring you a bit of that.
To the economy, consumer confidence in where the economy is headed hits a 12-year low. Waymo's self-driving cars are headed to another city. Ready or not, the Vances are going to Greenland, what we know about their trip later this week.
Yes, the effort by the administration to try to get Greenland to join the United States of America.
Some more insight on Pope Francis. His medical team says he came so close to death that they actually considered stopping treatment. And we are about to embark on allergy season. Is there a way to sneeze more quietly? Apparently, yes, Moshe. We'll explain.
Yeah, we posted this on Instagram, and so many of you are like, I'm sending this right now to my husband.
So there are a lot of loud sneezers out there, I take it.
That's what it sounds like.
And Moshe's on this day in history.
Jill, one of the biggest food innovations in the last half century on this day in history.
All right, the fallout continues after the group chat heard around the world.
Definitely heard around the world. Jill, our friends at NewsWhip, they do monitoring of the news and social listening. They have found that the Signal story, I guess what we're now calling Signal Gate, because everything has a gate in Washington, top story in the world across all English language articles, significantly higher than anything else we've seen this year.
Moshe, I think it's in part because this is one of those stories that's easy for people to understand because everyone's been in a group chat before where there's like a number they don't recognize. And usually they then side message someone being like, who's the 518 number or whatever. In this case, nobody on that group chat apparently concerned about an unknown number from Jeffrey Goldberg.
Yeah, that was one of the things that came up in Washington yesterday.
So President Trump standing by his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, and the Trump administration is just trying to downplay the security breach. As we reported yesterday, journalist Jeffrey Goldberg was accidentally added to a group chat on the app Signal with top cabinet members, including NSA Mike Waltz, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. That chat detailed plans about strikes on Houthi terrorists. According to Goldberg's report in The Atlantic, the initial group chat was set up by someone with the initials MW. As of Tuesday, Trump said that it was one of Waltz's staffers that may have added Goldberg to the Signal chat. That said, Trump does not appear ready to fire Waltz over the security breach. He said Waltz has, quote, learned a lesson and he is a good man. Here's a bit of Trump on Tuesday.
It's pretty simple, to be honest. It's not, it's just something that can happen. It can happen You can even prepare for it. It can happen. Sometimes people are hooked in and you don't know they're hooked in. They're hooked into your line and they don't even mean bad by it. But it's not a perfect technology. There is no perfect technology. The really good ones are very cumbersome, very hard to access. And I think we're going to look at, we always want to use the best technology. This was the best technology for the moment. But again, it wasn't classified, so they probably viewed it as being something that wasn't that important.
In a meeting at the White House on Tuesday, President Trump asked Waltz himself to weigh in. Waltz saying he's never met Jeffrey Goldberg. He doesn't know how he got added to the group chat, and then tried to pretty much change the subject. He acknowledged that he probably won't be using the Signal app again and spent time attacking Goldberg, the reporter who was added by someone on his team to the chat. One of the key questions now is whether classified material was included in the group chat. The White House is saying no classified material was sent to the thread. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said, quote, nobody was texting war plans. But according to Goldberg's report, Hegseth sent very specific military attack plans in the hours leading up to the attack. So, Moshe, again, President Trump standing by his team here in response to a reporter question. He says he is going to look into the breach. Other than that, they seem ready to move on. But as we are learning more, most of the criticism at this point centers on Mike Waltz, who seemed to set up the group chat on Signal, which anyone, by the way, can download from the App Store. So the concern, of course, is that Signal is potentially easy to hack. And also Pete Hegseth, who Goldberg says posted, quote, the operational details of forthcoming strikes on Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and attack sequencing. He said the information contained in them, if they had been read by an adversary of the United States, could conceivably have been used to harm American military and intelligence personnel, particularly in the broader Middle East.
Yeah, it's fascinating watching the development here because you could see as the story first came out on Monday, they were trying to figure out what tack to take and also where the president stood on this. You had an initial acknowledgement from the White House. Yeah, no, that chat is real. Sort of trying to downplay it. Then you had the Hegseth of the world attacking the reporter very aggressively, even though while there has been a contentious relationship between Goldberg and the White House, no one is disputing the facts in his story. What you had on Tuesday is sort of Trump saying, sort of a gentle parenting approach, Jill. We're going to learn from it. Mistakes happen. This happens. Very different tack from what you hear Trump has said in the past about Hillary Clinton and her use of an unclassified server for emails, his criticism of Joe Biden and various developments that came out of his administration. In this case, he's like, listen, mistakes happen. You got to learn some stuff. We've all learned some stuff here. And I think that attacks on Michael Waltz, my national security advisor, are very unfair. It's very interesting to watch this, and this is a discussion we've been having over on the Instagram thread, is that you had, and again, two different instances here in terms of what was shared, how it was shared, the dynamics, but the larger issue at play here is you had the Hillary Clinton private email server when she was Secretary of State, where somewhere along the lines of 30,000 emails got to her private server. Her people wiped the server, but of the emails that we saw, nothing that egregious, at least what came out of it. But at the time, Democrats saying, nothing burger here, Republicans saying this is outrageous and someone needs to go to prison. Fast forward 9 years, and you have a case here where Republicans, some of those same Republicans, including Trump, who are like, oh my God, Hillary Clinton investigation, et cetera, saying, listen, this happens. Like, ultimately, we just have to learn from this and maybe move on here. And you have Democrats who are fully outraged and calling for resignations here. It does come, though, Jill. The story isn't going away today or tomorrow. We are learning in the last 24 hours from CBS News. They've obtained a memo from the National Security Agency, which apparently sent a bulletin last month to its employees about what else? The Signal app, saying that it's vulnerable, even though it's encrypted. This is according to internal NSA documents obtained by CBS News. The NSA, by the way, the National Security Agency, is the arm of the Defense Department that handles what they call signals intelligence, electronic transmissions, cybersecurity, hacking. And they basically warned government employees, stay away from Signal. It can be hacked. The Chinese are trying to hack it. The Russians are trying to hack it. A bunch of groups are trying to hack it. Well, a few weeks later, you had the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, the head of the CIA, the Director of National Intelligence, among others, using for planning on the Houthi campaign, the Signal app. So on Capitol Hill yesterday, we were watching very closely as there was a pre-planned hearing of the Senate Intelligence Committee. This is called the Global Threats Hearing. This has gone on for a while. Among those sitting in the hot seat there, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, both of whom happen to be of the 18 people on that Signals group chat. The two of them basically run all of intelligence for the U.S. Here's Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, the top Democrat on the committee. This is what he had to tell them.
Putting aside for a moment that classified information should never be discussed over an unclassified system. It's also just mind-boggling to me that all these senior folks were on this line and nobody bothered to even check. Security Hygiene 101. Who are all the names? Who are they?
So, Jill, that was the theme from Democrats yesterday. In some cases, we were both watching that hearing. Some Democrats so angry about what took place there in the breach here that they were sort of asking questions, but not even letting the two of them answer, sort of just lecturing them during the time that they had available during the hearing.
Which was a little frustrating. You expect that kind of grandstanding at pretty much any congressional hearing. At the same time, I wanted to hear the answers. I actually wanted to hear what Gabbard had to say, what Ratcliffe had to say, and any kind of defense of what was going on in that chat.
Yeah, and so there are certainly people who lectured them with their time. There are those who actually asked questions. I found one of the exchanges we put up was Senator Mark Kelly's exchange with Ratcliffe and Gabbard, where he asked them sort of question by question what they knew, who was on it, and whether they thought having these sorts of conversations in the days and hours leading up to a military strike on a publicly available app was appropriate. And what was interesting is you could see how uncomfortable Gabbard and Ratcliffe got during it. At some point, Gabbard tried to claim she wasn't even on the chat, and then sort of Ratcliffe was next to her being like, we were on the chat. At times, they would immediately claim no classified information. Then they tried to nuance it by saying, well, no classified info related to intelligence, our department, but if you're looking for military stuff, we defer to Pete Hegseth at the Defense Department. Now, you did have Republicans on the committee trying to help them out a little bit. Tom Cotton, the chairman of the committee, he's a Republican from Arkansas, attempted to clarify. He's like, listen, I hear what you're saying is that no intelligence community classified information was on the chat, being specific about intelligence community classified info. But then Democrats were like, no, you said no classified info is on the chat. So the answer from Democrats was, well, if no classified info is on the chat, can you just release the chat? Like, sounds like it was a nothing burger. And they're like, no, we can't do that either. We can't release the chat to you either. And so Democrats were saying, like, you can't have it both ways. Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, I just mentioned him. He asked them if it's typical to discuss sensitive info on this app. Ratcliffe admitted that, quote, pre-decisional strike deliberation should be conducted through classified channels. So certainly there's some legal ramifications here of what they admit and how they admit it. But again, they sort of got clearance from on high yesterday because you heard how Trump discussed it.
Meanwhile, Jeffrey Goldberg says that there is, quote, more to come on the war plan group chat. In his initial report, he had said that he had left a lot of the chat out of the report out of security concerns and not wanting to put anyone in harm's way. But now that Hegseth is denying his claim, saying that he'd never sent war plans over Signal, perhaps Goldberg may release some of that information. It's unclear. Here is Jeff Goldberg talking to PBS. He said he agrees with the White House line that the group chat shows a real debate and discourse about whether they should attack Yemen, but that they just shouldn't have been doing it on a commercial messaging app.
They got quite lucky that they included my phone number if they're going to pick an errant phone number. I mean, at least it wasn't somebody who supported the Houthis, because they were actually handing out information that I believe could have endangered the lives of American service people who were involved in that operation.
So it's interesting, Jill, this sort of is now in the hands of Goldberg, because Goldberg said, listen, I didn't share everything because I got some really detailed stuff in there. But now you have the White House saying, hey, there's nothing classified in there. We're not worried about anything that was in there. So they're sort of daring Goldberg here to like release the info. And they're basically calling Goldberg a liar. And Goldberg is saying, no, you guys are lying. So it sounds like if I was Jeffrey Goldberg, there'd be an interesting discussion to be having with my team at The Atlantic about, all right, well, they're sort of daring me to release it. They say there's nothing here. There's nothing classified. So maybe I should go ahead and release it. I imagine he's talking to a number of lawyers about the law and whether they could pursue him afterwards and how to get that information out there. But he is effectively being called dishonest here. And he says he's like, they discussed detailed stuff. So how does he release that? Does he try to redact it himself? A good question here. Challenge for Goldberg. So this story, again, not ending anytime soon. As I mentioned, you had the Republicans sort of trying to support the administration yesterday. At the same time, you've had Republicans. There's Don Bacon. He's a Republican congressman from Nebraska, former Air Force Brigadier General. He called the White House's claims baloney about pushing back on like this not being a big deal. He says they got to own up to their mistake. That was one of the frustrations you heard from Democrats and some Republicans, which is like, just own up to say that like, this wasn't good. Like this was bad. You haven't quite heard that. They've been sort of dancing over that. But again, the question will now be, Goldberg, do you release the rest to show them that like actually there was some pretty detailed stuff in there? Do you take a back seat? You have seen a very aggressive approach from this administration against people who do things they don't like. Goldberg already has a very contentious relationship. I mean, he was the reporter, Jill. One of the reasons Trump hates his guts and these people hate his guts. Goldberg's the reporter who had the reporting back in the first term that Trump allegedly said that Americans who died in war are losers and suckers. Remember that line? Biden would repeat it a lot. Democrats repeat it a lot. Trump claims that he never said that, but that was Goldberg's reporting. So Goldberg has been under the skin here of Donald Trump going back years. So that's like one of the added elements here is that of all the reporters in the world to be added accidentally to this group chat, Jeffrey Goldberg, who Trump hates with all of his might. And that's on a scale, right? Trump dislikes a lot of reporters. And so that's a pretty remarkable thing. So what does Goldberg do next? Given all of this is one of the interesting things. And, my favorite place to get leaks for information, Capitol Hill. Does Congress obtain the transcript? Does it come out of Congress in the coming days and weeks is another thing to watch here. But I hear from a lot of people, Jill, in the military, in the national security world, who are like, anybody at a lower level who did something remotely like this would lose their jobs. And so there is animosity at a lower level. And that's another source of potential leaks here, who are like, wait, they get away with this? The CIA director, the Secretary of Defense, like at a lower level, if I leave something on a desk that has like the lowest level of classification, not like the exact weapons we're dropping on the Houthis an hour before with a journalist, I would lose my job. And so I am hearing that from people within the government.
It is so fascinating on so many different levels. And just from a journalistic perspective, it did feel like Jeffrey Goldberg was so thoughtful about the way that he approached this and which information he redacted, when he decided to leave the chat, when he decided to come forward on it.
Yeah.
And he's probably looking at this reaction and he's like, like, what? Like,
right.
What do I have to do here?
Yeah, well, he's probably not surprised given like the incoming he's taken, but like Hegseth like went for the neck on him. Like Trump's gone for his throat. Like Mike Waltz is just like, can you believe this, Goldberg? And he's like, dude, you guys put me on the chat.
But he technically could have stayed.
He could still be on it. We could still not have the story. Like Goldberg could still be on it and they could still be chatting about the next bombing campaign, right?
And he could basically have his next book at this point.
Well, I mean, but by the way, that was a criticism of Bob Woodward, that Bob Woodward often gets incredible scoops during his reporting. And he saves it for his book. Sometimes we don't find out about things that happen till years later because Woodward is like stacking up all these things. And so that's always been a critique of Woodward, whereas Goldberg had this, and people are joking that if Bob Woodward was put on the chat, well, first of all, like how would Bob Woodward, like, would he be good at Signal? But secondarily, like, would we even know about this till like the year 2027?
Time for the speed read from Reuters. Vice President J.D. Vance says that he is going to visit Greenland on Friday as the Trump administration continues to push to acquire the Danish territory. It was initially going to just be his wife, Usha, and other lower-level visitors. But here is Vance announcing the trip via social media.
I'm going to visit some of our guardians in the Space Force on the northwest coast of Greenland and also just check out what's going on with the security there of Greenland.
Moshi did begin the video with, "Hi guys, it's me, J.D. Vance, the Vice President."
J.D. Vance. By the way, if you're confused with that term guardians, that's the term we use for people in the Space Force, that they are guardians in the Space Force. Jill, this visit was going to be Usha Vance, the second lady, like going to like a dog sled race in Greenland. JD has like taken this to a new level. If you're playing sort of 3D chess politically, given the controversy over the group chat we've been discussing, it's probably not a bad idea for JD Vance to, offer up some new storylines. Nonetheless, Greenland has been the subject now of intense debate and discussion for a couple of months. The U.S. does have that military presence in Greenland, a Space Force base. We have been hearing from the administration how important Greenland is. We've been talking to you about it. We did actually a special workshop for Mo News Premium members. It's one of the pluses of being a premium member over at mo.news/premium. You get workshops. We went to a deep dive on Greenland over there. It's a key piece of territory, Greenland, the largest island in the world. China and Russia have renewed interest in the Arctic as the Arctic is melting. There's key minerals in Greenland. It's a key military situation up there. So J.D. Vance is headed up there. Now, the reaction from Greenland and from Denmark, remember Greenland is a territory of Denmark, is, guys, like what? We've told you repeatedly that Greenland is not for sale. Like, stop trying to buy us. Like, Denmark's like, you're not for sale. Greenland's like, maybe we don't want to be a territory of Denmark anymore, but we don't want to be part of the United States. The latest survey data from Greenland shows 6%. 6% of Greenlanders have an interest in becoming part of the U.S. 85% say, nope. Remember, Greenland has been a territory of Denmark more than 200 years now. This sort of American rhetoric is towards independence in Greenland, which is a country of about 50,000 people. But again, they're just like, stop, like you're pressuring us, like you're sort of bullying us right now, and we don't appreciate it. Denmark says, we're not for sale. Greenland's like, we're not for sale. J.D. Vance is like, well, I'm going to come. And so you had Don Jr. there. You got Usha and J.D. Going up there. Trump likes to refer to Canada as the 51st state, but they also like to refer to Greenland as a 51st state. So we'll watch this visit on Friday. And it's notable, too, because Denmark is a NATO ally. And yet the perception from J.D. Vance and the U.S. administration is you guys aren't securing it enough, and we have a vital interest in this. And so there you have it, at least as of right now.
So we're coming, whether you like it or not.
Whether you didn't invite us, but we're going to come anyway. All right.
We're
Greenland?
crashing the party.
Yeah. It's like the most American story in the world. We don't care what you think.
Some business news now from the Associated Press. U.S. consumer confidence continued its sharp decline as Americans' views about their financial future slumped to a 12-year low. It's driven by rising concern about tariffs and also inflation. The Conference Board reported Tuesday that its consumer confidence index fell 7.2 points in March to 92.9. For your grading purposes, a score of 80 is the cutoff point of a potential recession. So for now, we're good. But the issue is what comes next. The measure of Americans' short-term expectations when it comes to income, business, and the job market fell nearly 10 points to a score of 65, which is the lowest reading in 12 years and well below the threshold of 80, which the Conference Board, again, says can signal a potential recession in the near future.
So economists have all these scores, right? And so this Conference Board says if we're above an 80, we're good. If we're below an 80, not so good. The current score, again, as Jill stated, is just about a 93. That's how they figured out a way we grade the U.S. economy. But that 65, where we think the economy is going, that's not good. That's recession territory. So that's how American consumers feel. And remember, we're very much a consumer economy. The majority of the U.S. economy, gross domestic product, is based on how much we spend at stores. We're very much a consumer economy. So when consumers have a very negative impression of the economy, that does not portend well, because that means when we go to the store, we're buying less. Some of the nation's biggest retailers have already noted a shift in consumer behavior here, because when you see these headlines about tariffs and you see coming from the White House, hey, we might have to go through some short-term pain here as we sort of change the economy. There might be a recession. We can't rule out a recession. Already you're seeing stores, Target, Macy's, Best Buy, Abercrombie, Dollar General, all of them have talked about economic uncertainty in recent weeks, have been cautious about their expectations for sales. That then cools the market. We've seen the stock market cool in recent months here. We've seen that correction. So this is sort of the latest gauge we got yesterday, that American consumers not so sure about what comes next.
Sticking with some business news from CNBC, the autonomous taxi app Waymo officially on its way to the nation's capital. The Robotaxi service will be available in Washington, D.C. next year. So far, Waymo One currently operates in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Silicon Valley, and Phoenix. It's also driving in Austin and Atlanta through its partnership with Uber. The expansion follows a dominating 2024 for Waymo, which completed more than 4 million paid autonomous rides last year, as other robotaxi competitors still lag in the market. Service in Miami, by the way, will also be launched in 2026 through a partnership.
Yeah, that's with the startup Move.io. Jill, some of you may have watched as I took my first Waymo ride earlier this month in Phoenix. I'd been in Phoenix last year and I saw them on the road and I was like, I don't know how I feel about a car being driven by nobody. just like the machine. But I came back and I heard from so many people in Arizona, like, you got to check out the Waymo. You got to check out the Waymo. So I checked it out. Given that there was no driver there, I decided to go Instagram Live and just chat with several hundred of you as I took my first ride. And like, it was remarkably normal. I mean, in the beginning, it's weird because there's no driver there. But after a few minutes, you sort of get used to it. Remember, this was going to be a very competitive environment. General Motors had their own robotaxi service called Cruise. It began shuttering that. So Waymo still going strong here. They have a lot of those West Coast cities, and now they're coming to DC. So I'm looking forward, now that we're headed to DC increasingly, Jill, 3 to 4 times a month, checking out Waymo in our nation's capital. We should note DC has one of the larger traffic issues in the country, as a lot of people have moved there recently. So potentially Waymo here will solve for that.
We've been reporting on Pope Francis and his improving medical condition, but now some insight into how sick he really was from CNN. The medical staff looking after Pope Francis considered stopping his treatment so that he could die. This is according to the lead doctor taking care of him. While the 88-year-old was hospitalized with a drawn-out respiratory illness, the most critical moment reportedly came on February 28th when the Pope had a breathing crisis and inhaled his own vomit. One of the members of his medical team says we had to choose whether to stop and let him go or force it and try with all of the drugs and therapies possible, running the very high risk of damaging other organs. In the end, they say we took this path. Francis left the hospital on March 23rd after 38 days in the hospital, which is the longest amount of time that he has been in the hospital since his election as Pope 12 years ago. He had a number of breathing crises during his time in the hospital. 2 of them, they say, put his life in danger.
Yeah, there were some moments there, Jill, where I felt like, based on some of those headlines, like pray for him now, you started to get the feeling that the Vatican was preparing for his death and potentially, going ahead and voting on a replacement. But he was able to pull off this recovery, at least get himself out of the hospital, Jill. They say that a real recovery is going to take months, if not the rest of this year. And we will see how much of him we get to see around Easter time and, what it means for his subsequent plans. He has returned to his residence in Casa Santa Marta, where he will receive treatment when it comes to mobility, physiotherapy, especially for voice recovery, and engage in personal prayer. One of the key issues here that they say they're working on. So he will return to work gradually, they say.
And finally, as we're about to embark on allergy season, this story from the Washington Post, the science of a sneeze. Apparently, with some effort, we can actually control how loud we sneeze. Sneeze control involves regulating your breathing the moment that you feel a sneeze coming and also relaxing your vocal cords. One doctor who was born in Japan says a thunderous sneeze is actually a learned behavior. He says you hardly ever hear anybody sneezing boisterously in Japan. It is frowned upon to create such a loud noise to bother the public. So interesting, right? I never even
the
thought about that.
Japanese culture, very polite. Not like us Americans. We're sneezing all over Greenland right now. No.
I thought you were going to say like sneezing all over the subway, but yes, basically
no.
Greenland.
Sneezing over Greenland. It's like a metaphorical sneeze. Like you're one of us now.
Some of these sounds of a sneeze are unavoidable. And while experts say it is fine to muffle a sneeze, they say don't hold a sneeze in altogether. No. It is important to allow the air pressure in your lungs to escape. Okay, but now, Moshe, what everybody wants to know, is there really a way to quiet a sneeze if somebody were to want to do that?
Okay, so the Washington Post lays this out, and I got to try this next time. There are tactics here to muffling the sneeze, still letting the sneeze out, but not creating as much of a scene. So, according to doctors, the more air in the lungs, the louder a sneeze might be. So, if possible, exhale before your sneeze bursts forth. That lets out some of the pressure from the lungs, bleeds the balloon, so to speak. Try to relax your vocal cords. Imagine you're letting out a deep sigh. Keep your mouth closed. So breathe out, exhale, relax your vocal cords. Keep your mouth closed. Hold your tongue to the roof of your mouth to direct the air pressure through your nose rather than your mouth. And then, of course, sneeze into your arm, sneeze into your elbow. This is a lot to think about, Jill, when the sneeze is coming on. I gotta exhale. I gotta relax the vocal cords. I gotta let out a deep sigh. I gotta keep my mouth closed. I gotta put the tongue to the roof of my mouth. But if you can pull it off,
you win. You win at life.
The people around you win. And so does your reputation.
So I was reading the article in the Washington Post, and it said there's a lot of reasons that people sneeze. There are some people who sneeze when they look at the light. that's kind of a hereditary thing. There are people who sneeze if they tweeze their eyebrows. That's me. I tend to sneeze when I tweeze my eyebrows. So I think I'm going to practice this when I'm tweezing, because I feel like that's more controlled than when you're just sneezing because you're sick or something's bothering you.
Let us know, and then like get the app that tests like decibel levels of noise, and let us know what decibel level you're hitting. If it's like, less of standing on the runway at JFK and like more kind of library.
I've never been told I'm a loud sneezer. I'm a very loud yawner, though. Like my husband will be like, "Oh my God, keep it down. Why are you?"
Everyone has a thing: snoring, yawning, sneezing. Some people are noisy at everything. I think there's a general rule of thumb, which is don't hold it in. I think that's a rule for anything. Let it all out, everybody. All right. On this day in history, we begin in 1953. American doctor Jonas Salk announces that he has successfully tested a vaccine against polio. Salk had tested the experimental killed virus vaccine on himself and his family that year. And then a year later, gets released. Polio used to, of course, be something that impacted tens of millions around the world. The vaccine really a lifesaver, life changer for so many people. On this day in history, the Israel-Egypt peace agreement was signed on this day in 1979. A ceremony was held at the White House. Anwar Sadat, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, signing the historic peace agreement, ending 3 decades of hostilities at the time between Egypt and Israel. It's actually one of the reasons people ask, like, why are the top 2 countries, or nearly the top 2 countries we give aid to, Egypt and Israel? And part of that came out of this peace agreement. The U.S. was like, if you can sign this deal, we will support both of you for a while. A little fast food history for all of you. Pizza Hut introduced stuffed crust pizza on this day 30 years ago. Happy 30th birthday to stuffed crust pizza. If you thought there's no other place to put cheese in a pizza, Pizza Hut said, hold our beer, hold our slice.
You'd be wrong.
Has anyone thought about cheese inside the crust?
Motion your tease for on this day in history, you mentioned one of the biggest advances
in food history. Yes.
That's what you're referring to?
There was to my knowledge, no other food history happened on this day, March 26th. So I put stuffed crust pizza up there as one of the better innovations of the last half century when it comes to food. Do you buy it?
Sure.
I mean, if you got a competitor, you let me know. It's like that, and what's the ice cream of the future that never became the ice cream of the future?
The dots?
Yeah,
the
Dippin' Dots. They're like ice cream of the future. They declared that like in the 80s, and like I'm sitting here in 2025, and they're still not the ice cream of the future.
Yes, regular ice cream is still better.
Regular ice cream was the ice cream of the past and ice cream of the future. Dippin' Dots, I appreciate your effort and your pitch line, but no, I disagree. All right, we end here with a bit of music history. On this day in 1977, Rich Girl by Hall & Oates reaches #1 on the Billboard charts. And on this day in 1988, one of my favorite Michael Jackson hits, Man in the Mirror, reaches #1 on the Billboard charts.
All right, Moshe, that is a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends, even just share it with one person. It would really help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And review us in the App Store.
Those reviews matter. And so if on the Apple Podcast app especially, you can leave a review for us, 5 stars preferably. We would be so grateful to all of you. And Jill, we're headed to Washington today for a big day that we'll tell people about on tomorrow's podcast. I'll see you there.
See you in DC.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.